Welcome back, Holy Readers. This is episode 20 of Holy Holy, and I'm so glad that you're tuning in. Don't forget that you can go to regenerationnashville.org and find our reading plan, which is the live journal reading plan, so you can see right where we're at. Also, if you don't want to watch, but you just want to listen, find us on Apple Podcasts, on Google and Spotify. And then, of course, always right here on YouTube and Facebook. So like and share and tell your friends, because I believe that God is doing something exciting right here at Holy Holy. So this week's readings were May 13th through 19, 1 Kings 1 through 6, 1 Chronicles 22 through 29, 2 Chronicles 1 through 3. Then we've got a lot of Psalms, Psalm 91, 95, 78, 101, and 97. 1 Thessalonians 3 through 5, and 2 Thessalonians 1 through 3, and then Romans 1. Wow, that's a lot of reading. But we're completing some really great books here. We're going to complete 1 Thessalonians 1 and 2 Thessalonians, and we're going to complete 1 Chronicles. So don't get disheartened at all of the reading, because it's exciting times right here. So 1 Kings, let's talk about it. Remember that 1st and 2nd Kings are one book, just like Samuel and Chronicles. And the reason that they're divided into two is because of scroll length. But these are this one unified book with one unified story. So Kings focuses on the kingship and really specifically the Davidic line. Because remember, in 2 Samuel 7, that we just recently talked about, that God promises David a kingly line that will be eternal. Someone from David's throne that will be a messianic figure that will reign forever and ever. So when Solomon comes up, you think maybe it's him, but it's not. It's not, but it's going to be someone like that. In fact, Matthew chapter 12, verse 42, Jesus says, one greater than Solomon is here. Jesus is referencing this Davidic line where the Messiah would come. And Jesus is the Messiah, and he's one greater than David and greater than Solomon. So the first section is about the reign of Solomon, and this is chapters 1 through 12. So the first two chapters, 1 and 2, David passes on the kingdom to Solomon. And then he tells Solomon, remain faithful to God and remain faithful to his covenant. This should feel very familiar. It should feel like Moses when he charged the Israelites to remain faithful to Yahweh and his promise. And then it should also feel like Joshua when he was passing on and said the same thing. So this great Davidic kingship is being passed on to Solomon. And it's the same Davidic challenge, which is be faithful to the covenant of God. Then we've got chapters 3 and 4. This is where Solomon asks for wisdom. Oh my goodness, what a beautiful passage. And to be honest with you, I often pray this passage because Solomon says, I'm like a child, Lord. I can't do this. I don't have the wisdom to do what you've called me to do. This also kind of reminds me of Genesis 1, where Adam and Eve would walk in the cool of the day with God. And I believe that God was imparting wisdom to them at that time, because it would take great wisdom to be able to till the garden properly and to be able to name all of the animals. God was imparting wisdom, and ultimately Adam and Eve chose earthly wisdom over God's wisdom, right? But right here, Solomon, he chooses God's wisdom over earthly wisdom. And can I tell you, friend, that right now, today, you can ask God for wisdom and he will give it to you. James chapter 1, verse 5 says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. Ask the Lord for wisdom today to parent your children, to be a good spouse, to be a good coworker. Ask God for wisdom today to run your business or whatever endeavor that the Lord has set in front of you. And God will give you supernatural wisdom to do the task that he's called you to do. Chapters 5 through 8, Solomon builds the temple that David wanted to build. And this is powerful because this is a fulfillment of David's dream, where Solomon is really carrying on what David envisioned. And then the design of the temple is described. This is also echoes of our Torah, right? Where you get the design of the tabernacle, and then you get the design of the temple, and then later on, you get the design of the New Jerusalem in the prophets. This should also make you feel a little bit like Moses when he received the designs of the temple. So 1 Chronicles 21, we've got chapters 22 through 29. And this is where David is making preparation for the temple. And this information here is not found in Samuel and Kings. It's just right here in Chronicles. So chapter 28, verse 19, it says, all this he made clear to me in writing from the hand of the Lord, all the work to be done according to the plan. And Solomon and David, they received the plan of the temple directly from God, just like Moses received the plan of the tent of meeting right there on the mountain directly from God. So these are echoes. And then 28:20, it says, then David said to Solomon, his son, be strong and courageous and do it. Do not be afraid and do not be dismayed, for the Lord, even my God, is with you. He will not leave you or forsake you until all of the work for the service of the house of the Lord is finished. And I would encourage you today, friend, be strong and be courageous, for God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And if God was with David and Solomon to accomplish his purposes, the same God is with you today. So be strong in all that God has called you to do. Be courageous. Step out in faith and see what God will do in you and through you. Amen. So let's pick up 2 Chronicles next week and move on to Psalm 91. This is one of the most famous of all of the Psalms. You probably know it very well. But for just introductory purposes, Psalm 90, the author is not identified. So we don't know who it is. Psalm 91, the author is not identified. But Psalm 90, right before it, it says that Moses is the author of that psalm. So it's very possible that Moses is also the author of Psalm 91. If not, it could also likely be David. So the Midrash, which is an interpretation of the Talmud, which is a part of the Jewish tradition, they identify Psalm 91 as written by Moses. But this right here, Psalm 91, is not also about it's not only about physical protection, but it's also about strength and salvation, that God is going to be with us. So let's just read a few verses. The one who lives under the protection of the Most High dwells in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say concerning the Lord, who is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. He himself will rescue you from the bird trap, from the destructive plague. So right here, God is a refuge and he is a shelter. And if you need a refuge and a shelter today, run to the Lord, because he is an ever-present help in time of trouble. Also, very interestingly, in Luke chapter 10, verse 19, Jesus references this exact psalm. He says, I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all of the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you. Moving on to 1 Thessalonians, we see the founding of the church of Thessalonica in Acts 17. This is one of Paul's earliest letters. And so they are flourishing, and Paul hears about it and he writes to them. 1 through 3, those chapters celebrate the faithfulness of God. And then 4 and 5, Paul challenges them to grow. Then you've got 2 Thessalonians. And so Paul hears that there are problems that are getting worse, and he addresses those here. They are being persecuted, and then they have questions about the second coming, and they're very confused. So Paul just addresses all of those. Chapter 1, each chapter is a new section. Chapter 1, he encourages them in the midst of their persecutions. Chapter 2, he gives them clarity about the day of the Lord and the second coming of Jesus. And then chapter 3, he addresses idle people that don't want to work. So right here, it's a beautiful work. We'll pick up Romans next week, but be encouraged, friend. God is with you. He is for you. Step out in faith, because I believe that God is working. Don't forget to email me, Jasmine at regenerationnashville.org. See you next week. God bless.